Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Compton, publisher at the American Society of Civil Engineers. I will just say this is a really interesting spot to be presenting in because I've listened to everybody all day, and I no longer want to say any of the things that I had originally planned, but just ditto. So I'm going to try to tie some things that I've heard today together with what I'm presenting on. So I want to talk a little bit about the SDGs and our organization, ASCE, and how we view the connection between the SDGs and our mission and our strategic objectives. So this looks much nicer here, where the white can be differentiated from the blue, so apologies for that. But we updated our strategic plan at ASCE last October, and there is now some substantial language that kind of permeates through the plan that really captures the essence of the SDGs. So we talk about things like adapting infrastructure to the changing global climate, to integrating sustainability and equity in infrastructure solutions, to really looking at civil engineers as systems thinkers and focusing on interdisciplinary research to catalyze advances and addressing grand global challenges. So for us, where we sit as part of an organization that has such a clear tie to the SDGs, it makes sense for our publishing strategic objectives to encompass those values as well. You already answered that you know the SDGs pretty well, so I'm gonna just kind of really briefly just reiterate Anne's point earlier that it is striking that every category, every discipline can probably find some tie here. It's easy to boil the SDGs down to good health or really focus on what we traditionally think of as sustainability, i.e. climate. But it's much, much broader than that, encompassing things like poverty and hunger and gender diversity and inequalities, peace, and education. So I think if many of us in this room are to think about why do we do the things that we do every day, there is some tie to the SDGs. And I find this a really nice way to think about what's the value that we're bringing by producing this content or adding this product or this service. So just going back to where we have been in publications at ASCE, we actually, before the update of our strategic plan, I will just say, decided to become Publishers Compact signatories. And I'm just going to go on record as saying that means that I have foresight, not that I was going rogue in this decision. But we signed on to the compact. We have about 300 publishers who have signed on since October 2020. And this is just a brief kind of outline of the 10 commitments. And they sort of bucket into 3 areas. So prioritizing sustainability within your organization, raising awareness within and outside of your organization, and finally taking action. And I think one thing the compact has been criticized for, and I believe rightfully so, is that it can be really easy to be like, I'm going to sign this, like that's fine, and then I don't really need to do anything about it. And sure, I think that's true, but just taking a step to some extent and having somebody who's thinking about these things, you don't really need a fully formed plan to become a signatory. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the many, many resources that are out there to help you develop some kind of lightweight actions that you can take as a publisher to at least make incremental progress along these lines. So what have we actually done at ASCE? So one of the things that we had long been interested in was being able to bucket our content related to sustainability. And one of the challenges that we really faced there was, from our perspective, almost everything we publish is related to sustainability and sustainable infrastructure, sustainable development. At the same time, we would get feedback from organizations we were partnering with, well, why doesn't ASCE publish anything that has to do with sustainability? And that was like, well, we do, but we're not classifying it in that way. We're not doing anything to display that. And the SDGs give us a really nice way to not say, well, here's everything we publish, find the connections. We can now classify in more granular buckets and say, these are where we have ties to sustainable infrastructure, clean water, climate action, clean energy, and so forth. So we have long had a taxonomy to classify our content. We developed an SDG-focused taxonomy that helps us pull out content that are related to these collections based on taxonomic classification. And we developed these portals that lead through to some curated collections. And now they will link through, if you look on the left, they'll link through to all the content that we have. This one is related to industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And you can get to all of the content, but we do spend some time, and it is, admittedly, it is significant time that we spend curating these to figure out what is most relevant and updating these on a quarterly basis so that in the curated collection we're always unearthing the most recent, but we're getting better and better at this. So, the first time we put together one of these collections, it took us hours and multiple people thinking through, where are the ties for this article, where's that, and now we're able to refine the keyword searching that we do, the taxonomy terms that we're looking at, to kind of rank relevance in a more automatic way, and then, we're kind of looking through embedding and saying, yeah, that seems right. So it does get easier. Moving off of raising the profile of SDG content, I want to loop back to this whole idea, to Jaren's point of interdisciplinarity. We also realized at ASCE that we were getting a lot of great sustainability content, but we were also not getting all that we wanted. To put some perspective around this, we had 34 fairly, some are more niche than others, but kind of sub-discipline focused civil engineering journals. So things structural engineering, geotechnical, environmental, some that are relatively small and very small audience. And we were seeing, as we were looking through and thinking, okay, so what are we really publishing and what are we not getting? We were realizing that many of our editors were rejecting content as out of scope because it wasn't firmly within their niche. So we were launching an open access journal, and we realized just being open and providing an open venue that we don't want to compete with our other journals, that's not enough. So we really put a strong focus on the interdisciplinarity because this content is becoming increasingly so. And earlier on this whole communicating the science, the storytelling of it, we've invested time into also contextualizing this research. We have an infographics program that strives to do this by looking at the top content in each SDG that we publish around, and we work with Impact Science to, based on the curated collections, create kind of accessible infographics. We work with our authors to ensure that we're giving what we call practical application statements that are specifically written for non-specialists. So we've talked about this throughout the day, so here's another ditto. We work with Kudos to the same set of goals to communicate outside the specialist community. And I do want to touch on some of the other work that I do outside of ASCE as well. So I am part of the HESI SDG Publishers Compact Fellows. We're a multi-stakeholder group that our mission is basically to provide advice and resources to drive change in publishing, so taking action on the Publishers Compact and advancing the SDGs. We have a series of resources on our website, so top action tips. Some of these are specifically focused on the publishing community, and they do cover things like the things that we're doing at ASCE, contextualizing research, classifying and disseminating and raising the profile of research. I think these are useful, but they are also a starting point. Want to touch on an output that is coming out of STM soon, within the next couple of months, I believe. So the STM SDG Academic Publishers Forum, which I understand now is becoming an official committee of STM, is working to develop a kind of a practical guide for publishers who have become signatories to the compact, to inspire action, support staff who are responsible for making progress in line with the commitment. So essentially the roadmap will collate suggested actions, links to resources across areas like engaging your leadership and your governance, accelerating the advancement of knowledge and research, advocacy, and reporting, target setting and reporting. So this is, again, essentially a blueprint for publishers, and I think what's important here is the roadmap isn't really intended to be, or isn't at all intended to be prescriptive, but indicative and inspiring in terms of the steps an organization might want to consider, but is also intended to be adaptable to an individual organization's specific situation. And to that point, they are looking at, or we are looking at 3 different maturity levels for organizations who are working in the SDG space. So getting started, integrating into your organization, and measuring and reporting. So where does one begin, and how do you continue to make progress over time? And Research for Life has already been talked about, which is great in terms of, what Research for Life is specifically looking to do. I would say if you're a publisher and you want to make some progress on SDGs, an obvious thing to do in terms of reducing inequalities is to donate your content, look at things like waiver best practices, which can go a long way. And I know I'm short on time, so I'm stopping now. Sorry, guys. Thank you, everybody.